newsroom in the old days? Was there? I mean, I remember all the nicotine on the ceilings in our office. What was the drinking?
Bit of a yellow tint.
Yeah, the yellow.
Yeah. Well, there was, and one of the people he's long dead now. He was a copy editor. His name was Doc Myrna. Doc Myrna was a classic old time print guy, and he wore the, what do you call them on your sleeves? To keep your sleeves up.
Yeah.
And he actually had a green eye shade.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Like the poker players?
Yeah.
And those.
And old time editors would wear those, but I'd never seen anybody in my era wear it. That Doc Myrna did. And I started out at the Daily Press, so that meant I worked from like 4 in the afternoon to midnight. And Doc Myrna, he was, if nothing, he was meticulous about timing. Every night about 11 o'clock, I'd see him open a drawer, bottle of whiskey,
Sure.
take a couple chugs of that, and that'd get him through the rest of the night. And nobody said anything back in those days. It was a different time.
No.
Today you'd get fired on the spot for something like that. But
Whoops.
in most places.
But
anyway, when Doc retired, I forget how many years he put in there, the publisher came in. I'm trying to think who was the publisher then. George Dastic came into the newsroom, and some publishers are different. I mean, they have different styles, and some publishers would never come to the newsroom. Other publishers would be in there all the time. Depends on how they came up. If you came up on the business end, you probably wouldn't come in.
Know that feeling.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you came up on the writing end,
Yep.
you're interested. You'd be there in a lot. So anyway, George Dastic didn't come up on the writing end. He came up on the business end of Gannett. Walked into the newsroom. Of course, everybody sees him, and they stop. What's the publisher doing here? And he walked right over to Doc Myrna's desk. Doc Myrna stands up, and he shook his hand, and I see an envelope go from the publisher to Doc. He leaves, and I go over to Doc. I said, Doc, I'm curious. I got to ask you, what was in the envelope? He said, $500 cash. I said, oh, that's great. Yeah, I said, what did the publisher say? He said, take it to the track and blow it, which Doc did. But Doc was a big horse fan.
Oh.
So, yeah, he had a good time with it.
I mean, getting right into it, Joe Kelly, been around the industry, actually 11 years old. I saw you started out as a newspaper carrier. It seemed to be a classic track for a lot of people in the area.
Yeah, that was a good occupation.
It was a solid occupation back in the day.
It was a good occupation, and in fact, if I could get the book done that I'm working on now, I'm tempted to write another book on things that I learned. Everything I know, I learned by delivering newspapers. And you learned a lot by delivering newspapers. You learned about people. You learned about finances. You learned about your work ethic. You learned a lot. And, I had a morning route and I had a Sunday route. A lot of customers made a lot of money for a kid.
Sure.
And especially at Christmas time. Got screwed out of a couple bucks for some people.
Another life lesson, right?
Yeah,
That's a life lesson as well.
Yeah, exactly. So that was my start. You're absolutely right, yeah.
Yeah. I hear that from, I was a carrier back, because, I mean, we've been around since 1864. The OD goes back even earlier than that.
Yeah.
Actually, I found out it was briefly in Rome, New York. Just briefly. There was a time period where, it would have been before Frank, obviously, but no, it would have been around then, where it was the Oneida dispatch. So I guess they were going for the county thing. Then it moved back to Utica. It became the Utica dispatch, and then it became the Observer dispatch later on. That's kind of more when with your time, but I didn't realize it was in Rome.
Interesting.
Briefly.
Wow. Then they had an office. They had an office up here in Rome too, when a branch, so to speak, with Pat. I can't think of Pat's last name, who was the Rome bureau person for the OD for many years. Yeah.
So you got to be one of the, one of the longer standing employees that worked there. It started off as a carrier, then went as a writer, then became a columnist, and then still a columnist to this day for us.
Yeah.
In Kelly's Corner.
Yeah.
Is writing the passion, or is it more about learning? Is it about what?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I got into most things in my life ass backwards, really. My training was in electronics.
Oh.
And I worked up here at Griffiss for an organization called GEA, Ground Engineering Electronics Installation Agency. And GEA was big. And I think it was the 2861st GEA Squadron. Might have the number wrong, but I was a civilian. I worked there, and it was a good job. I was not a good electronic technician, but it was a good job. And you would go. There was no work on the base. You traveled. And you went up as far north as Thule, Greenland. You went down to, how far south did we go? Dover, Delaware. We went to DuLine sites in Canada, Reykjavik, Iceland. And you repaired TACAN systems and ILS systems. The TACAN was a way to navigate, for Air Force planes to navigate. And it was really a neat kind of a thing. You dialed the frequency of the TACAN on your instrument panel, and a radial came out 360 degrees from this radar, and then you got on that radial and flew it right to that. So it was a very valuable piece of equipment back then. And the money was good, you know. Today everybody gets direct deposit, I guess. You know, instead of giving you a physical paycheck, they send it to your bank. But not back then, late 60s. But the Air Force had it because we were on the road so much. They would take your paycheck and send it into your bank. And before you left Griffiss, you'd get cash, TDY money, temporary duty money. And I was always watching my pennies. And so I'd come home with money, and my bank account had the check in it. So I made out well. We'd stay at an officer's club for free. You know, we'd drink and eat for, you know, $2 a night. So it was a good way to live and a profitable way to live. But then I got married, and my wife said,
the traveling fund's over for doing all that, or what?
Yeah. Well, you know, you're on the road 10 months of the year. And
it's great when you're a bachelor.
Yeah. And then after a while, she said, maybe you should go back to that job. But
yeah, funny how it makes its way around.
Yeah.
Did that start your maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, the passion for the business for Griffiss? Because I know you even launched the Griff, which was a paper that went around the area. You've always, you know, I still have to do it, and I'm sorry I haven't done this, but I know that Bob McHale would really like to sit down with you.
I'd love that.
We would love to get it, and I probably should have even tried to get him into this thing, but you know, him being a B-52 pilot,
please,
you know,
I'd love to
get you guys to talk, but I guess going back to I did have. Since you've been in the industry so long, I did have a question about newspapers, just in a few. And what's your take on how newspapers are viewed today, and where do you think it's going? I asked you that because there's very few longtime new journal. I don't want to say journalists because it's a little different, but people passionate about the industry and. Everything's changing, so I'm always curious about how you see it, where you saw it, where you see it, and where it's going.
Well, you know, it was interesting you asked that because I was just talking to. There was a panel. In fact, your Pam Spearbeck was on the panel down at the United County History Center, and it was interesting. We kind of got around to that, but not quite. But Shirley Williams was there. Shirley was a reporter for the OD for many years. She knew what was going on in the city. When reporters would come to work at a newspaper back in those days, not just the OD, but any newspaper, most newspapers, they stayed. When I started down there in 79, I think it was,
76.
76, was it? All right, whenever it was.
I may not be a journalist, but I have some research.
All right. When I started down there, they put you on probation for 90 days. First off, they didn't want to hire me. Can I tell you the story?
Yeah.
Yeah. I went down there and I applied. I was working for State Senator Donovan. And I left Griffiss and GIA, got a job at GE because my wife said, you got to be home more than 2 months a year. This isn't going to work. So I left GIA, went to work at GE in Utica, 901 Broad Street. They made the F-111 fighter jet, the radar for it. They called it terrain following radar. And this was just a wonderful invention. The radar would just send pulses down to the ground, and the plane could go up and down over the hills, just feet above the ground without the pilots even having to look out the window. Anyway, I worked there. Then you both guys are too young to remember, but GE had a huge national strike. Everybody was out on strike in GE. And so as a technician down there, I wasn't managing, I was a technician. I was walking the picket line every day. And you only had to do it 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day, something like that. And then you had the rest of the day to yourself. And most of the guys I worked with went to this little bar around the corner and played cards and drank for the rest of the afternoon. And I have nothing against either one of those things, but it just seemed to me that I had this 4 or 5 hours that had been given to me, and I was going to use it. And there was a mayoral race in Utica at the time. Mayor Mike Caruso, or candidate Mike Caruso, was running against Mayor Dick Asaro. And I thought, I've always been interested in politics, and I thought, here's an interesting opportunity here. I called up the candidate. He answered the phone himself at the headquarters. I said, do you need anybody to stuff envelopes or put stamps on envelopes, something like, oh, yeah, we always need those kind of people. So I went down, and he had a little upstairs office on Genesee Street, right above the busy corner on the west side of the street. Went in there, and that's what I did. I walked a picket line, then I went up there and did my little clerical stuff, and I'm watching everything go on. It was fun. And then one day somebody walks into the room who was handling all the candidates' speeches and news releases. And the guy says, his name was Tom Carmandre. And he said, can anybody in here write a news release? Nobody put up their hand. And the word I heard was can. Not have you, but can you?
Right. That's fair.
Well, I put my hand up.
Yeah, sure.
He said, take this home and bring it back tomorrow. I took it home. But on the way home, I stopped at the Utica Public Library, and I got a book. And I remember the title of the book to this day, How to Write a News Release.
I was just going to guess if that was the title.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I put it down there. I put the information there, and took me 3 hours to write a release that I could do in 10 minutes today. But anyway, then he walked into the newsroom, into the election room one night. Can anybody here write a speech? And so I raised my hand. And by the end of the campaign, I was writing the minor news releases and minor speeches. He handled the important ones.
Did you check a book out on that too, or no?
I did.
Okay, good.
Actually, I did. That's
Yeah.
a good question. I did, but I can't remember the name of that book. But I did check.
I could guess.
And
How to be a political speechwriter.
yeah. Well, somebody said to me, a librarian said to me once, long dead, she said, the answer to every one of your questions that are in this building, the key is being able to find the right book.
Shout out to the Dewey Decimal System.
I love it.
Yeah. I just had Chris Sagas, who's the director of the Utica Public Library, on my show, and he brought a picture to show me. So would you like this? I said I'd love it. It was a picture taken of me in early 80s maybe, with Judge John J. Walsh, who was a great man, and he wrote a lot of books about Utica after he retired from the bench. And behind the judge is those big cabinets where they put the index cards for the Dewey Decimal System. Anyway, the mayor won, much to everybody's surprise, including his. And this was prior to polling, so nobody had any idea. He won. he went to City Hall. They settled the strike at GE. I went back to GE, happy to have had the experience. And we weren't back to work more than 3 or 4 months, and they had a massive layoff at General Electric across the country because of that strike. So I got laid off, and that wasn't fun, going home and telling your wife after being out of work all this time, now you're out of work again. But anyway, a couple days later, I got a call from the then mayor. Well, how would you like to come to work at City Hall? Writing news releases and speeches and answering my mail, that kind of stuff. I said, I'd love to, but only until I get called back to GE, because I'm an electronics technician. I'm not a, all right, do it that way then. And I went there. And about, I don't know, less than a year later, I got called back to GE. And I said, I don't think I'm coming back. And I stayed at City Hall. And I had a very supportive wife, thank God. And then Senator Donovan called me. He said, you want to come work for me? Which I did. So it was kind of a move up. And from there to the newspaper business. So I just kind of got in the ass backwards. I never went to journalism school or anything like that. I hesitate to say that because some people say, yeah, it shows too. But
well, we weren't thinking that.
No. So going back to books, when I was doing some research on today's podcast, I came across a book that was called "The Wit and Wisdom of Joe Kelly."
Thin book,
195 pages though.
Yeah, but the font's huge, right?
But the font's huge. No, there was a great section of you showing. And I don't know whether they're made up, but they looked fairly real. They seemed like some of the comments we get on some of the stuff we publish. But you're quite witty when it comes to a lot of those responses to some of the comments of the column. And I think I had a couple of them here, but I almost look at it today. I would be like, it would be great to have in our Twitter team for some of these
just ahead of his time,
just one-offs. Right. And I showed Wes a couple of them earlier. What was? Did you have fun with that? Like, how did that?
Well, the interesting thing about that is you don't have to be that witty when you're doing it in print because you got a little time to think.
That's fair.
And if you're doing it here, then you got to, it's pretty spontaneous, pretty quick. But when you're able to sit back for a couple of minutes, it's a little bit easier. But can I get back to that question you asked me about the passion?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Before. So anyway, it kind of worked itself in the back door of that. And the more I wrote, the more I liked it. And I liked it a lot better than working for a politician. I liked it a lot better than working with electronics. And I like words and using words they're very powerful. And
do you prefer the written over it like this, where you have time to kind of formulate, or It's
two different worlds, and I like. To me, it's easier doing this and doing TV. When I do TV, I've got a weekly show on WUTR. I show up at 10:30. We start taping at 11, and I'm out of there at 11:45. And I don't prepare unless it's somebody's written a book, and we're going to be talking about their book. Then I owe it to them to read the book, which I do.
Homework, right?
But no preparation. But I like sitting down and talking. It's easier than sitting down and writing. Writing, I find, is very. I don't know about you guys, but to me, writing is difficult.
It's a process for sure.
Yeah. I almost find myself sometimes dictating or talking and then going back and writing something because I am not a writer. Going back to what you were talking about, publishers coming up two ends. Dad came up in the newsroom and more of a computer jock as well, but he was well written and Mom was the same way. But I came up on the circulation advertising side,
right?
And that's very
the business side.
Yeah, they usually do, and I completely agree. It's interesting to look at of a publisher who came up through the newsroom and versus who came up through the business.
Two different ways of looking at things.
There absolutely is. And but I was surprised to hear you say that about you write because you write a lot.
Yeah,
and you have been writing for forever. And so it's just interesting to hear that.
Well, Dorothy Parker, I don't know if you know who Dorothy Parker was. She was a writer back in the 1930s, very witty. She was a humorist. She wrote short stories. She was a member of what they called the Algonquin Round Table. And this was a group of writers that gathered once a week at the Algonquin Hotel in New York City, sat around a round table, and drank and talked. And it was very, just, don't you talk about witty. And
Especially as the night went on, I bet.
Yeah. And Dorothy Parker said something once, and I read it, and it's always resonated with me because it describes my approach to writing. She said, "I hate writing, but love having written." And that's me. I hate the process. Now, a lot of people love the process. I don't. I just find it difficult. I do it because that's what I do. And when I'm done with it, I love it, if it's decent. There's been some times, more times than I'd like to admit, that I got done. I didn't love what I had submitted. But one of the nice things about journalism is you've got a deadline, and you got to, at some point, that's it.
Yep.
You're done. You got to send it in. And sometimes it's okay, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes maybe it's good, but sometimes it's not so good.
Reminds me of running, like lacing up the shoes, not looking forward to it. But your first mile, not really enjoying it. But when you kind of get to that point and you start getting in the rhythm, and then especially when you're done, that runner's high after. Oh, that was great. So
I didn't know you were a runner.
I pretend to.
Yeah.
I stumble through, but but yeah, it's similar.
You got a
similar
runner's
feeling.
physique.
We
We got to keep Joe on all the time. I like that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned before we came in here, do you golf? There's
Little bit.
We chatted a bit about it.
There was
yeah.
references to golf.
Yep.
Again, I was skimming that
Little
book.
bit.
It was actually really entertaining. Like I said, I'm going to show you a couple more of his comments in that.
I like golf, and I wish I was better at it. I wish I could play like you guys, but I like getting out, and my wife plays a little bit as well. And so it's a nice time. You go out and
Yeah, you're outside.
and have some fun, and then you stop for a couple drinks
There was
afterwards.
one comment. Do you have a lot of golfer jokes?
Not a lot.
Not
no.
a lot. Okay. And I'm probably gonna cut this up, but I wish I had the book. It's still in front of me because there were some things that you were talking about. There was just very
Yeah,
comical.
that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you found that.
Yeah. No, it's really good. And
I got to mention something about, you brought up your father and being a writer. I got to mention something about your father, and I've told him this. We were on a trip once. EADS, which is up the road,
Yep.
used to be NORAD.
NORAD. Yep.
And they sent out, boy, I'm trying to think of when this was. Boy, it's a long time ago. Inviting businessmen, journalists, and politicians to go on a trip.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's not the
I
beginning of a
accept it.
joke. Yeah.
yeah, I accepted. Your father accepted. There was about 30 people I
Fairly
guess.
uncomfortable flight last night.
It was on a
It
C-130.
was, yeah. It's sitting in mesh sheets or something.
Yeah.
Is that the one? Yeah. I remember hearing this.
Yeah. Well, I didn't sit in those mesh. There was like nylon straps.
Yeah.
I didn't sit there much. What I did was I went up front and I sat with the pilots. And on a C-130, you got the pilot in command on the left seat. You got the co-pilot on the right seat. Then you got like a flight engineer right between the two of them. And then behind that, there's some seating room, just a couple seats and a bunk bed. I got up there, I sat on that bunk bed, and because I'm interested in flying, I got a license, and I let it be known that I had a license. So they said, "Come on up," and so I sat up there and enjoyed it. But anyway, what I was getting at with your father, we all were going to, those of us that were in journalism, were going to write a story about it. So I said, well, when I get back, I'll knock out something. Your father had a story written on the plane before we got back to Utica, or back to Rome. And it was a good story. I wish I still had it. He did a good job capturing the whole.
So he was
fast.
writing it. Yeah.
He had some kind of a laptop with him. But I was impressed, really, because I'm not a fast writer. he wrote that, I'm going to guess, an hour. He was fast.
Yeah, it's annoyingly good.
Yeah.
And that is one thing I think why we worked well together over the years, because he has a very different skill set than I do. He can edit and write something incredibly fast.
Yeah.
And incredibly accurately too.
Yep.
There are a lot of people that are fast, but you got to clean it up. He can almost have a print ready article on something.
Well, he showed me that as we sat on those mesh sheets, the web seats, as we landed here. He said, "Take a look at this, would you?" And he was right on, right on. I didn't find one typo, one thing that I thought was inaccurate. I mean, very good.
Yeah, I wish I had that. It is there are many times even here, which is why I rely on a strong news team here, because it does take both sides, and I think that's where it's always interesting to see how operation or newspapers ran because of the way the publisher is. But yeah, the to have that skill set and to be able to tell a story clearly through the written word is everybody knows. I mean, that's why some books are good. And
this is much different than when people say, "I got a story about your father." When they say that to me, it does not end like that. There's usually a judge involved, and police, and so that was refreshing.
Good. Yeah.
It's like, wow, that took a really weird turn there. That was a nice story.
Yeah. You know, I gotta say there aren't too many skeletons in the closet from last Jen. So can't say there's new ones, but
I was just looking at a picture of your grandmother talking about good people. And I was we got to go to a meeting at the United County History Center, and I was looking at the website for something, and there's a beautiful picture of her on that website. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but you got to go nitacountyhistory.org.
This is the butterfly one?
Yes.
Yes.
It's a beautiful picture.
Yeah. So that came, Peter, her oldest son, we were in, that picture was taken in my parents' parking, or in her driveway. There was a way to, I don't know if this is humane or not, but there was a way to not freeze them, but cool them down enough so they were stable. And so he brought butterflies in a box to her. And as soon as she opened them, they went out and then came back to her. And that's where we got that
nice.
photo, which was kind of cool how it all came. And that's the photo that is used often is around the community. And
really classic photo.
Yeah, she always had that great smile.
And who took the photo?
That was either Peter or my father. It was one of the brothers. So they were always, both of them were good with a camera. So I don't know. And but no, that's and Shirley. I've heard her name during this expansion at Utica. It was a name that she didn't care if you were a Roman or a Utican. She just she just wanted to know good people. And, I'm trying to hold up to that. It's big shoes to fill for sure.
I was just going to say that's you've set your standard pretty high.
Yes.
Yeah.
You got no shot, Brad.
No, I'm just aiming for status quo. Just getting by through it. I do. Another question. Do you still stop by Holland Farms for a cup of coffee and a powdered sugar jelly?
I do.
Donut? Do you?
Yeah. Not as often as I used to, but I'd say
that's decades of doing that.
Yeah. I'd say once a week, maybe.
All right. Shout out to Holland Farms.
Yeah.
Staying true for.
Yeah.
So was that on the way into the OD every morning?
I used to live in Whitesboro, so we had to go right by there anyway. And it was the, great cup of coffee, great jelly bun, and so I'd often stop there. And I knew Marilyn Wilson, and her sister, Suzanne Spohn. They were the daughters of Mr. Piersma. Mr. Piersma, who started the business, was a great man. He was big in aviation. He was a farmer, dairy, Holland Farms, but he was an early pilot in our area. And so I'd love to talk to him about flying, and wrote a couple columns about him. A good family, yeah. I think it's Susan's daughter now that runs the business.
Yes, I'm getting a nod from our statistician back there that it is. Heather. Yes.
Okay.
You mentioned flying a couple times. When was the last time you were up in the air?
It's been a while. It's not like golf. I mean, with golf, right. I haven't played golf. I didn't play golf all last year, but it's not going to stop me from going out and playing golf this spring.
Yeah, what can happen to you?
But you're not going to, hopefully you're not going to kill anybody.
Right.
But
now flying, that's a little more dangerous.
Flying's a little bit different.
Yeah.
You got to be up to date. You got to do it a lot. And and I'm not. So I keep my license just to say I've got it. But
Well, it's good to say when you're in the bar for a pickup line, you know?
exactly.
Yeah, right.
You know what would be interesting, and I'm almost setting this up for you, but Bob is my instructor, one of my instructors. I think it would be fun for you to go up and chat with him up in the air.
Who is that now?
Bob McHale.
Well, I'd love just to be around him. I mean, anybody that flew B-52s, I just love being around these people.
Oh, yeah.
Pilots, to me, and I'm not counting myself into this, but pilots, to me, are exceptional people. All they have to know, all they have to do, their judgment, they just seem to me to be exceptional people. And I've known a lot of them over the years, and I've never been with one that has disappointed me. Well, I take that back. There was one. But other than that one, I've known many, and not disappointed me. They're really good people.
That's a good point. Whenever we get visitors in, and we had a few squadrons here, there were some C-130s, there were some refuelers, there were some other, I think even B-52s were here. When you meet them, they actually care what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like they always have this charisma about them. There's this.
They're exceptional.
They really are.
Yeah.
Even so, when I would go to Millionaire over here for class, when I was in the classes every, I think it was Thursday night. Watertown pilots with helicopter they would come down.
That's Mountain Division.
They would come down. They would come down for pizza and wings, and then they would fly back.
Yeah.
But every single one of them that we were talking was willing to talk to you and just have a conversation and just they're solid guys.
I was in where was I? I was in BWI, Baltimore.
Baltimore, yeah.
I spent a couple weeks in Florida earlier this year. Coming up, stopped in Baltimore. Had a long time to kill at BWI, and the Southwest pilot just happened to be standing near me. He was going to fly up from Baltimore up to Syracuse. Young guy. And so I got talking to him. And just, I don't know, exceptional. He flew in the National Guard in Texas. And he went to Texas A&M. And he flew C-130s. And C-130s have been around. That's the plane we went out to Colorado, your father and that whole crew. And just an exceptional person, and he was telling me about how long he'd been flying and, what he'd hoped to do in life and that he just got married and, it just people that are nice to be around.
Mm-hmm. It is a fun community. I'm trying to get Wes into it a little bit more. I miss it. I ever since COVID hit, I've had to shut things down. I have 2 kids now, and I got to get back into it. But what was cool about it was there's this whole group that just wants to get away, and you get to share experiences, and everybody's had a different experience, and you get to have a $100 burger on a restaurant that you can only get to if you fly a plane. You get to go to these major events like any other thing, but Oshkosh and Sun and Fun and all these. And then it's just fun. It's kind of like car enthusiasts have their groups. It's no different.
It's a little bit more expensive though.
It's
it's a little bit.
A couple extra zeros
on
the end of it.
Yeah. You were kind of saying are helicopter pilots a little bit off compared to fixed wing, or how does that?
Well, I mean,
are you stopping short of that statement?
I'll stop short of that. I will say one of my friends growing up might remember Scott Corbett. Mike Corbett is his father.
Pat Corbett's the name I was trying to think of earlier, who used to write up there. Yeah, go ahead.
But Scott, he was a fighter pilot, and even though they're all one of the nicest guys I know, I feel like they all have switches though. That at some point they need to flip a switch and just go into this mode, and then they can get right out of it and just be the. And I think it takes a special person to be able to go into and he was a Navy pilot, flying the carriers, that whole thing. He actually now is commercial flying, so that seems to be a natural. Especially now with the shortage of pilots, you're starting to see a lot more coming out of the fighter pilots and the C5s, the C17s, and then moving over to commercial as a.
I miss that up here. Not to get into a discussion of that, but I miss Griffiss. I'm happy.
You miss the spooling of the eight engines every day.
I do. Yeah. I do. Yeah. And I miss the F-106s. And B-52s and KC-135s flying over Utica for a long final for runway, was that 3-3, I think.
3-3, yep.
And I just miss all that kind of stuff. Thank God the right people were in charge and got this place as it is today.
Yeah, to hold the Air Force Research Lab and to hold the runway and to,
yeah. Because it was, I remember standing on a corner over here coming in the side there. What's that street where Burger King is? Is that Chestnut?
Chestnut.
Standing there with a group of people because the folks from BRAC, the Base Realignment and Closure Committee, were coming to tour Griffiss, and it had been announced that it looked like Griffiss was going to go. And there were people out there with signs, save Griffiss. Joe Griffiss was out there.
I think we were out of school for that. I think we
probably
bust all the kids into really pulling the heartstrings. Didn't work. But.
Yeah, Joe Griffiss was there. A lot of the politicians were there. You're right. It didn't work.
Right.
But anyway, I miss the Air Force days. It was a great Air Force base.
Well, it's nice now that we know that we're fine. I'm sure coming out of the early '90s and with the uncertainty is crazy, but we talk about it on this podcast and a lot. But where we are today is now even bigger and better. And we toured the Air Force Research Lab in Inverary 2 weeks ago. So we were able to see some of this. It's just incredible. It's just it's mind blowing.
Where did you tour? I'm sorry.
The Air Force Research Lab in Inverary and with Mike Haydick and his team and we've always talked about we even talked about bringing back whether it's something like the Griff like you had monthly, weekly, bi-weekly, and or something that just to kind of tell the story of more of what's going on here and connecting Rome and the park, which still is an issue, and also just connecting the people that are coming through.
Well, I think that's really a great goal because this place is so big, geographically and people-wise, and if you had something beyond, we're talking beyond a newsletter. We're talking not a broadsheet, but a tab. Something that would kind of bring everything together, and something that would say, well, this promotion was done the other day at our company, and we're having an open house at our company. Just something to bring it all together. I think that there's something there.
Yeah, we're somewhere around 65, 70 businesses. I think just on the 13441 zip code, and over 6,500 employees or something. I mean, it's basically a city.
And plus, Brad, there are many people who aren't on this acreage that are interested because they do business here or they have friends here or whatever. So the numbers multiply. So I think that there's a readership out there.
No, I'm game. And any input, honestly, what worked for you when you did it, and it's definitely still on our to-do list. I think it was pushed aside to our Utica to-do list was the expansion to Utica and fulfilling that void.
Well, you got your priorities right anyway because that was that was a game changer there.
And even I get some messages from Donna Donovan. All these people that used to be at the OD and just seeing where it is today and almost just saddened.
Well, it is sad. It is a sad way to put it, and I'm sad. I think the key to a newspaper is local. You got to keep it local, and there is no or very little local news.
We just got a letter today. I saw from a News Sentinel subscriber. Thank you very much. Her renewal letter said to renew with the Observer Dispatch will cost her $63 a month plus tax. So $822 plus a year for a USA Today shell. It seems pretty steep.
I'm not sure about the rates. I hate to badmouth the OD because I put in 20 years there and I get a pension.
And to be clear, we never went into the territory because they did a great job. I mean, they had a great team, covered the area well. They even had Rome news. And there was no chance of us ever putting up a battle over the decades to try to do anything there. The only reason why it worked today was they lost a very, as you said, it's got to be local for it to work. We're not a New York Times. We're not a Washington Post. We're not. And if you're going to be a city newspaper, even regionally, you got to have boots on the ground.
Yep.
You got to have local news. And it really wasn't. I went to the chamber and I went to the mayor and I said, "Are you guys being served?" And as soon as they say no, I haven't seen a reporter here, and I was like, all right, now we can make a move because they did a great job. I mean, Donna did a great job through the years. I know it was close to there. There was a couple of Terry who did a great job. And once they lost the local feel, it was in
fact, I think I said to you, I know I said to you at some point, I don't remember the timing, but that there was an opportunity for the Sentinel to move into Utica, and it was all because of the local coverage or lack thereof. I sit next to I did sit next to the mayor Palmieri at the hockey games, and I remember one night we never talked business. We were there to enjoy hockey, the Comets hockey. But one night he turned to me, and he said, "What do I have to do to get a reporter to come to City Hall?" And I was just so taken aback. When I was there in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, mayors had an opposite reaction. What do I have to do to get these reporters out of here?
Again?
How can
I don't want them here.
Right.
And because they're asking questions that I didn't want to answer, but it was so long because they just gave that up. When I started at the OD, I covered Whitestown. My beat was the Whitestown Town Board, 4 village boards, and 5 school boards. And I was expected to be at those meetings. And if I wasn't at those meetings because I had a conflict, I had to go back and piece it together so that I could have that's how much scrutiny they had. And unfortunately, it's a manpower issue. I don't have to talk to you. I mean, that's the payroll.
No,
it's a lot easier to sign the check on the back than it is the front. And
that's a very good point.
Yeah.
when you wanna cut some expenses,
humans are expensive.
But to that, we're constantly trying to decide because you need unique information as a local newspaper, and the only way to get that is to get local information, but that's expensive. So we're constantly working on models of figuring out, okay, what could be done by a freelancer versus a full-timer, right? When I look at my full-time employees, I need them in positions that you need the history and the knowledge to report. So politics, you kind of need to know what they did, where they've been. School districts even could warrant a full-time employee. And so our resources of full-time employees are really going into the areas where you need to know, okay, what were the previous votes? Why are they here?
Right.
What's going on? Not that you can't research things, but that takes time. And we're trying to produce news quickly. And then moving to a freelance model on some of the general assignment stuff. Even game reporting doesn't necessarily, you don't need to know exactly the history of where the team's been, but how do you at least write about the game that's happening in front of you? So those are the things we are looking at and saying we need manpower. That's every day into the politics of Utica and Rome and the surrounding districts. The manpower to cover the district. We have a ton. Our area is huge here. When you look at Oneida, Madison, and Herkimer County, it's a big area. And there's a lot going on in it.
And sports. I'm glad you brought up sports, Brad, because sports. I had 2 granddaughters who went to Oriskany, and we would quickly pick up the Sentinel the next day because we wanted to see if their names were in the paper.
Right.
Yeah.
They played. They had a good game. They won. She got, 15 points. Was that good?
Sure.
Well, if for some reason it wasn't in the paper, you had a disappointed family. And but back in those days, they covered Oriskany pretty well.
Yeah.
And sports are,
Yeah.
Sports are huge.
And we are putting out, and our new goal is to find anybody that might be interested in at least getting us the information. We can always make it look good.
Yeah.
We just need the information.
Yeah.
Get us a photo of a sporting event. Get us somebody that can at least take a picture so we can get the names and photos in, right? You know, and I think that's really where our next mission over 2024 is saying, we want this stuff. Who can provide it? There's always moms and dads shooting photos at games.
Yeah.
Hey, send it into us. We might even pay you for it.
Yeah.
Right. So
The
those are
Uber of journalism.
Yeah, the Uber of journalism.
Right.
That's
well,
a great.
I
great
like
way of
that.
putting it.
Man,
Yeah.
I might steal that, but don't expect any credit.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
That's gonna be-
But I like that, and that's really an interesting model. Back in the 70s, Les Diven was sports reporter at the OD, John Pederesi. They had some greats, Phil Spartano, really great guys. And as big as the sports staff was, they couldn't get to all these games.
Yeah.
There's too many,
No.
and they're all on the same night.
At the same time.
Yeah, so you can't do it. But these guys had relationships with the coaches. And they'd say, look, we can't get there because we're going to be here. And so we're going to miss this, this, and this.
Yep.
Would you send us the scores?
Yep.
Would you send us
The box.
the
whatever.
box?
Yeah.
And they would.
Yep. Yep.
And so, you know, because those coaches want to see their athletes get some recognition.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's a time-consuming thing to talk to all these people, to make arrangements with these people.
Yep.
But it can be done,
Yep.
and particularly in today's technology.
If we can open up the avenues for people to even on a form, basic form, submit, put in a photo,
Yeah.
take a picture of your scorebook. We know how to read scorebooks too. We can decipher that. That's
Yeah.
in the, but just getting the information allows us to then broadcast it
Yep.
everywhere. And
Yeah.
and so we're working hard in the background to figure out the portals, the relationships we need to cover the 30 games that night.
I'll tell you,
between modified and
I
varsity.
wish you good luck with that because that's huge. Sports, and not only this area, but other areas, is huge. And there's nothing like a proud parent or grandparent. They want to get up and see their kid's name in the paper. They want to see that score in the paper. So that could be that and obits. I'll tell you, those are the obits are big.
Yeah, they really are. And honestly, the big we talked before coming in here. I didn't realize that becoming paper of record was going to help the obits. The obits is really, if we can continue that mission and win that, then I think we have officially run in reach and stuff like that. But to be the local paper, the obits is one of those check marks you need to
It's a
make
big
sure.
check mark. Yeah, it's very important.
very
Well,
big.
you know, and it's interesting the way you read the paper too. When I was young, I'd look at the front page, I'd just skim it. Then I'd turn to the sports page, read that thoroughly. Then I'd go back to the front page and read that, and then go into the local section. Then I would read the obits. Now I look at the front page, then I go direct to the obits.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're a big part of a newspaper.
They are, and they're a real paper of record. You know, it's
Yeah.
a huge life event, and unfortunate as it may be, but it really is it is one of the most popular clicks on the website. It is
No
one of the
question,
most
right.
viewed website pages in the paper. Nothing we can do about it. It just is what it is.
And you know, it's an interesting thing too about newspapers in general and reading a newspaper. You're an event. I was at a Kenny Rogers concert. I don't know why that popped into my mind. Years ago, down at the Utica Memorial Auditorium, now the Adirondack Bank Center. Gave a great concert. You know who his warm-up act was? Garth Brooks. Isn't that something? Garth Brooks was
yeah.
a warm-up act for Kenny Rogers. Anyway, watched the concert, great concert, went home, got the paper in the morning. What do you think the first thing I wanted to read? I wanted to read about the concert. Well, I was there. I didn't need to read about it. I was there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But that's the first thing I wanted to read about.
You want to relive that.
Yeah,
See how
yeah.
it's
Did you
documented.
experience the same thing as the view through the person there too? I mean, is that part of it, or is this?
Well, I guess I wanted to relive and I wanted to see their take on it. Sure. And sometimes that can be disappointing. You know, you're there and say, wait a minute, was he at this or she at the same event I was at? You know, but you're associated with it. You want to.
Sure.
And so I think there's something to be said for these big events. You know, you got to get there. You gotta get it in print.
Speaking of big event, you were part of the Boilermaker.
A lot of years.
I have a great quote from the book that I found. Again,
Okay.
going back to this book.
All right.
All right. So
Strong
it said-
quote.
Strong quote. Running the Boilermaker is like sex. When it's good, it's very, very good. And when it's bad, it's still pretty good.
I forgot that I wrote that. Yeah.
One,
Okay.
does that still hold up today? And two, talk about the Boilermaker. I mean, huge
Yeah.
event.
I guess it's
Go wherever you want with that
Yeah,
quote.
I'm just going to let you respond on however you want there.
Yeah. The Boilermaker is something very important to this community, and not just the running community, but the community as a whole, because it shows how good we can do something, and it's made a national name for Utica. I remember being in airports when I was wearing something with the Boilermaker logo on it, and have somebody come up to me and say, "Oh, geez, I ran that race, and what a great time!" Or "I want to run that race someday." Mm-hmm. So it's good for the community economically, and also in a mindset. It's grown over the years. It's had some ups and downs. Earl Reed did a tremendous. Earl was the race director for years. I was the assistant race director for years. A good part of my life, an important part of my life. And, as a runner, not so much anymore, not at all anymore. I walk, but long distance running can take a toll on your knees and your hips. And,
Sure.
And plus I did a lot of marathons. So, but friends made and experiences and all those things, the Boilermaker was just such an important part of my life. Yeah. I wouldn't change any of that. There may be some decisions I made, but about things, but I wouldn't change being a part of all that. It's just a great, great time. I don't think anybody in Utica would disagree with that. It's people will disagree about mayors. They'll disagree about the site of this convenience store. They'll disagree about this and that. Very rarely would you ever find anybody that would disagree about the importance of the Boilermaker and the value of the Boilermaker. It's done wonderful things. I think a good analogy to that is the Utica Comets.
I was just going to go. I think that's that next thing that could almost match what the Boilermaker has done over the years.
It was interesting. I've been asked, when Utica turned a corner, and I'm not sure what year it turned the corner, but you couldn't find anybody that would say anything good. Everything was down. Everything was negative. You couldn't find a good, positive feeling. But that changed, and things started moving up, and things started getting built, and I've been asked, when do you think that happened? And I think it happened when we got that AHL hockey team.
Right. The rebirth of AHL in Utica. Right.
Yeah. And I think it got people believing again, and it's just a wonderful thing that happened for a city our size, Utica size, to have an AHL hockey team. Mm-hmm. Big, very big.
And to do well. I remember reading, Utica is the city God forgot, and all these things people would write, and it was just like in love with their own depression, or it was just that was the feeling around. But I think that might have been the catalyst, the spark that kind of got people going the right way, and now, boy, it's exciting.
And you look at all the things that's happened, building-wise, and of course the government's got money nowadays, and they're handing out money, and so that's a part of it too.
Sure.
But people who live in a community, it doesn't matter if it's Utica or Rome or Little Falls, they want to be, I think, proud of their community. But you got to give them a reason to be proud of. You just can't say, okay, you be proud. You be happy. It's not that easy. You got to give them reasons. But if you give them reasons, they'll start rooting.
Yeah, we're Wes and I have been kind of on this thing, and I think the question that's being asked of Rome now even is said, oh, when you go to Rome, you should visit blank. And the more that each city can have multiple bullet points when you ask somebody who's new to the area or even just in general, And I think that's where Utica is ahead of the game a little bit because, when you ask them, I'm going to Utica, where should I go? Well, you got to go to a Comets game.
Yeah.
Gotta go Bag Square.
Got to go to Bag Square.
That's
go to
coming
the
alive.
Brewing, Bag Square Brewing or Taylor Cook or Ocean Blue or Nostro or the Stanley or so. And I think that's where Rome is trying to figure out is, hey, you're going to Rome, you should go to blank, right? And so I think that's where we're trying to not fall behind,
Right,
in a
right.
sense, because there's so much that Utica and Rome can do together, and so that's
Well, there used to be too, Brad. There used to be, and I remember from my reporting days, not my column days as much, but from my reporting days, which were earlier, there was this thing, Utica Rome. It was not good. And I remember somebody in Rome, I can't remember who it was, or I'd tell you, say to me, I wrote an article and I said, in the Utica Rome area, and he said to me, well, why do you always say Utica Rome? Why can't you say Rome Utica? And I said, I don't know why I say it that way. But so anyway, there was that kind of, it wasn't good. But over the years, I've sensed that has gone away. And you get things like the Capitol Theater. I think those are important, You don't have to be a movie lover, or you don't have to be to know that these things are important to the community. Art Pierce has done such a good job over there.
Sure. Yeah, the whole sector over there, and that's the momentum we need, but you got to keep going.
Yeah.
You got to keep going. And this meld of Utica Rome, and I think that's I think that needs to be used more. It's the greater Utica Rome area, right? It's rare you have these two cities that are small, medium sized, so close together, and where each has their own resources and have their specialties, especially with the business park now growing in Rome and the food and entertainment in Utica. There's a lot going together that aren't very far apart.
Yeah.
So
no, you gotta. Could we do, before we go? Can we do like a home and home series? Seeing as how I came up here, would you come and do the TV with me?
Absolutely.
All right, good.
Absolutely.
Maybe we have to bring your sidekick with you. I don't know.
You never know.
Yeah,
Might need some color.
Yeah, we always need the color commentary and keep each other on track. But Joe, I appreciate you coming.
Thanks for
Oh,
coming in.
nice of you to have me.
Thanks
Thank
for having
you.
a cocktail with us. And,
Yeah.
We'll hopefully do this again.
Maybe I ought to start this on my TV show. I don't know. You get loosened up a little
do.
bit and you start
Yeah,
talking.
that's
By the third, fourth hour, you're really into some good stories.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again.